Nick.
Hey Jeff, how you doing?
Good. It's good to meet you, man. You do go by Nick, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I changed it to Nicholas on Instagram when I got the blue badge thing because I was afraid of not being able to log in one day. And they're like, oh, it's got to match the driver's license. And I didn't see the thing where it says you can put a nickname. So now it's Nicholas on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then what about your last name? Is it Rung or Runge?
Runge. So
Runge.
yeah, it's a strange one. Yeah, it's like Runge in German, something, but I can't pronounce it the correct German way. So
Gotcha.
in America, Runge, but it's always been Runge. I kind of answer to that growing up just because it's easier to than trying to get people to hear it over the phone or something. It gets all different kinds of things. So.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. People mispronounce my name. My name's the easiest name in the world to pronounce, and I get it all the time.
Yeah, HEIN, right?
HEIN. No, I get HEIN all the time. It's like, what? You never know. All the time's a stretch, but it happens on occasion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, dude, it's great to have you on the podcast, man. I've been dying to meet you for years.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, your paintings are phenomenal. I was just looking at them today, just getting ready for this. It's like, wow, I don't know what I can really add to this.
Oh,
I know
dude.
it's interviews about each person, but it's just phenomenal. I can't believe, especially from life. I've been listening to a few episodes, and I know you talked about kind of working with photos a little bit again. But all those years of painting from life, just unbelievable. The detail you can get.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, the accuracy. It's really impressive.
Thanks, man. I mean, that means a lot coming from you because you're truly a master painter. You know what it is that I think separates you from myself? The little self-deprecation here. You've just got, I mean, I'd like to think I'm an okay designer, but you've got a gift, man. It's like the way you just organize color and shape, and you can take just a simple portrait and turn it into something far beyond that is extraordinary, man. It's really cool.
That means the world coming from you. Trust me.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, I gotta tell you one thing too, man. You're frustrating though, because I have tried to buy paintings from you for years, and like, it seems like nothing's ever available. You sell them like that, I'm assuming.
It's one of those things where I appreciate that. If you ever do want to talk about buying something
let's
directly,
talk after.
We should. But yeah, it's one of those things where I never know. Sometimes I have a feeling and I'll get cocky, like, oh, this one's going to go right away. And it sits for days and days or doesn't go, or I take it down. And I do have quite a few paintings in my studio that I just kind of thought, I just don't want to leave them up anymore, or I'm trying to showcase maybe a different style at the moment or something, and they're not like mixing in there. So I still have a lot hanging around. I'm just kind of, I get weird when I put them up for sale, and then I think like, oh, should I charge more or less or what? And then it sits there, and then I'm like, am I crazy? And so I appreciate that. I think smaller paintings have been easier. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's the hard thing, figuring out what to sell things for. My students constantly are asking me that. It's like, how do I price my paintings? And my answer is usually, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is.
It's so dependent, I find, on, it can be dependent on what you've sold a painting for. Obviously, that's the easiest way to convince someone, I think, is this is what it's sold for. And, but yeah, I think it doesn't really matter to me what the size is. I mean, if you're getting wall size, obviously prices are going to be a lot bigger or something like that. But I think it's just a certain magic to each piece that it's unexplainable. Like, why is this one more expensive than this one? And to me, it's just, I just think it's not necessarily a better painting, but it spoke to me more, or it's stronger, or I would feel worse about letting it go. And so I just want a little bit more for that one. And
so
other
are you
ones,
more of a gut pricer then, or because a lot of artists are just square inch price. Period.
I try to be both, because I don't want to be unfair to people or crazy, where they're like, why is a tiny painting way more than this other one? So I try to be reasonable. But yeah, I have to say I am kind of more of a gut pricer, and sometimes I don't stick to it as much as I should. I think I need to get braver about like keeping it that way and not being like, oh, should have put it on sale or something right away.
Right.
Um, but yeah, for the most part, I try to think of, I try to build it up over the years and be fair to what I used to charge to what I try to charge now. And I really still want to get much more than I am now eventually. So
Yeah.
I'm always searching, I feel like, for the path forward, which I think is one of the great reasons I think you do this podcast and so many people enjoy listening to it. Is I feel like we're all still searching, and some people seem so confident when I look at their work, and then I hear them say like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, how can you say that? So.
Yeah, I know. I think just about everyone I've interviewed kind of has a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty wild. All right. So
Totally.
I want to know about your history. So where did you come from? How did you end up becoming an artist?
So I'm from Colorado. I grew up in Fort Collins. Excuse me, but both of my parents are artists. So it was kind of
No way.
What
kind of artist?
So my mom has worked as a graphic designer for last 40 years, and both my parents are retired now. And my dad is a painter.
Really?
And yeah, so it was, I don't know, honestly, if I would have gone into it without their encouragement, just because growing up with an encouraging art background, you also hear all of the opinions about it, and it seemed really intense, but then the encouragement made me think like, okay, this is worth a try, because otherwise I think I might have heard about art and how difficult it is, and just been like, I'm going to find a different way in the world, because I find that it doesn't get any easier. Things make more sense to me now, little by little, but it just doesn't get
when
easier.
You say it doesn't get easier, do you
mean
the business of it, or painting, or both?
I think that the kind of both. Like, my skills have improved, but I find that I don't struggle through paintings as much, but it does seem difficult still to manage the time and get enough of them done, or focus on ones that I might have rushed through a little bit. And it's become more of a time mind game that I find difficult now, whereas before it was more of the skills, just learning perspective and all basic things that were just such a nightmare. Because even learning from my parents, luckily my dad showed me a lot of drawing techniques, and then obviously my mom has such a good sense of design, and my brother's also an artist, so we're all I have a younger brother. Yep.
Wow. Jeez, you guys are like the Peel family.
I know. We try
That's pretty awesome.
Thank you. So I don't think of it necessarily as a family business, because we do seem like four very separate people in the way we think about creating things, and styles that we've used in the past. And I say it because my dad doesn't make a ton of art anymore. He's about 78 now, but just the other day he showed me a card he made, just a birthday card, by cutting up paper and putting it together, and I was like, God, this is brilliant. So it's fun to see that. And I've learned so much from my mom that I've used today as far as design and dealing with clients and things like that. And my dad was a teacher for over, I think, 23 or 24 years, an art teacher. So at a community college. So I know the value of community college, and I didn't actually finish college. So that's something I think about a lot, but I'm pretty comfortable at this point. Just not having a degree.
Finish college?
So in about 2004, I was 19, and I was really just getting interested in comic books, and that's what I wanted to start in. I wanted to be a comic book artist, because ever since I was really, really little, watching the cartoons and seeing comic books at Toys R Us and places. I didn't even know about comic book stores or anything when I was that young. And then my older stepbrother was actually storing a bunch of his comics at my dad's house, my stepmom's son. And so I just started looking through them, and I just didn't really understand how fascinating sequential art was until I really started looking at all these different comics from different artists that he had just collected. And there's these 2 or 3 long boxes. And so fast forward to 2004, I really, after high school in 2003 ended, I did a few crazy things for a couple of months, like hop trains and stuff like that, and hung out with the lots of punk rockers and stuff. And that was kind of, I wanted to be a drummer, and I thought like, oh, music is going to be the thing. But I always just have felt like an artist. It's a weird thing, even thinking like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to use that ever professionally. I always felt like that is me, and that word is thrown around a lot, but I always just felt like, well, I think drawing wise, I didn't really think about painting. So in 2004, I was getting really, really interested in comic books, and just started to really go to comic book stores a lot more and look at a lot more art and think like, what does it take to get from where I am to that point? And just really realizing the tidal wave of stuff that I didn't understand as far as perspective, anatomy, just seeing the world. Because even if you're drawing in lines, it's basically like you're still seeing what a painter would try to see. So you're thinking in, if you're drawing in black and white, you're still thinking in color. You have a colorist maybe who's a different person, but it is still, I find that first training ground was so difficult. So just meeting friends in Colorado who were interested in going to conventions, I started to fly out to San Diego and really meet real professionals. And so in 2010, I moved to Denver. And there was a little, in 2009, back up a couple months, I drove down, there was a little comic book fest. They didn't have a convention there yet. And it was just in a hallway. And I met a ton of people. I met my good friend Ben, who I've known for years now. And then Zach Howard, who's a professional comic book artist. And he's a really good friend of mine. And I think meeting him and just seeing the level of quality he brought to it, it did seem like something that could be attainable if I met the right people. And it's kind of, when you meet somebody that's that talented, it's very intimidating, but he was actually pretty warm and open right away. I remember going out of the hallway and the convention was over, and there's a little, it was in the Marriott or something. So the hallway just was open and people were having beers, and all of a sudden it just felt like junior high again or something. I was like, where do I sit? I had a beer, and Zach's, big tall guy. And he's like, oh, come over here, right here, And so I sat down with him and his wife, Megan, and they were just really nice right off the bat. And years went by of just meeting editors in San Diego and through, the internet and through Zach and various other people. It led to a little bit of work at IDW and a tiny little bit of cover work at Dark Horse and stuff. So that was about 2000. Let's see, started going in 2006 to Comic-Con, and then from there to about 2015. That's really what I wanted to do, is mainly
just
covers.
So I can visualize it. 2006, you would have been 21. Okay. Yeah.
So flying out there and just wandering the floor. I wasn't good enough to get a table or anything yet. And they did have a thing called the DC Talent Search, where you could just submit pages, or they didn't really want covers. They didn't want colored stuff or anything. They were just really looking for just pencilers and inkers for sequential books. And it was a really big long shot. And I never got DC work, but I did get an interview with Bob Schreck, who was the Batman editor. So just even getting an interview and feeling like, okay, it's one step closer, was a lot of encouragement. So I'm really surprised at this point that I didn't stick with comics. But just a few years of really tiny covers and not a lot of money, and going to the convention and finally getting a table for a few years. And
your own table.
Was working, my own table, and just an artist alley, not like a big giant booth that I couldn't afford to pay for something like that. I don't know how it works now, but at the time you did have to have a little bit of work published. Yeah, that's something. But I had spent so much time just trying to get those covers done that I really wasn't working on improving anatomy and things to the point of working for one of the big two, or being able to actually keep deadlines with monthly issues. It was too much. I had tried a few issues periodically, like 7 to 10 pages and things like that, and it just was so difficult, because you get the first half of the issue looks great, and then the time starts to pick away at it, and the last few panels look horrible. And it would be okay with the editors. They think like, this is okay, but then the internet, the people on the internet reading, I just thought like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I wanted to just step away. And the idea was always just step away and just get better at this. But then all of a sudden, movie posters, randomly, I started looking at books, Drew Struzan and Bob Peak and those kind of guys. And I really started getting more interested in that. So the last couple of years of Comic-Con, 2012 was the last year I went to San Diego. I was more focused on being illustration, kind of more photographic stuff, more posters and things like that. It's really more of design. and less of that. Just you have to be such a workhorse in comics. You have to draw everything. So that kind of made me think, oh, moving to California might be a good idea just to get around to the studios more. And so in 2013, I got an offer at a really small game company called Quark Games that was up north in Cupertino, just really tiny little mobile games. And that was the first time I ever painted digitally, and I learned a lot about Photoshop and things there. And so for about a year and a half, I worked there, and it was really intense in a different way. And all of a sudden, I'm in a game company, and I'm not very good at video games, and so everybody was nice there, but I just felt like I wasn't really fitting in with that crowd either. And they were all super nice people, but I just felt like I want to go back to trying to just do freelance. And I moved down to Pasadena, and it was probably, I'd say 2014, I started to really just think about, what does painting mean to me? You know, who am I as an artist? And illustration's amazing, and it's really nice to bring someone's idea to life. That's the thing. The people that don't think about illustration maybe don't think of a lot, is just the joy of creating something for somebody that they can't necessarily do themselves, or they might have had a ton of other artists to pick from and they picked you to do it. So it's quite an honor. But I just started to think about, what do I want to paint personally? And are these styles of other artists like Struzan and people that I, no one can ever paint that, I think, at that quality, but I was trying to get as close as I could. And it was weird to always think, like, anytime you think about anything, you think of what would they do and how would they do it to get that certain look in order to get a job or a big commission from people, since posters are kind of mostly Photoshop now. I see illustrated ones coming back, but in 2014, I didn't really see any of that. So it really started to kind of eat away at me. Who am I as an artist? And it doesn't mean that doing a style that someone else came up with is copying them. I would never copy a face or a pose or anything that's like theirs. I'd never do that. But just the style is fine. You're just using a tool to create something. But I started to get a little scared that I just didn't really know who I was and what I actually wanted to do. And I had always painted a little tiny bit with oil paint since 2004, but I never really gave it the time and effort. It was always so scary to me, which is ridiculous now. I think that any certain paint would be scary, but the way people talked about it, yeah, it's an intense medium. So
yeah.
It was around 2014, 2015 that I started to really want to get into oil. And it's interesting that the watercolors have now kind of taken off, where that was a thing where it was really just a preliminary thing.
The oils were.
The watercolors were preliminary for the oils.
Oh, gotcha.
And I just had so much fun with them. I remember I think it was January 1st, 2016. I thought, like, I'm going to start the new year with some fun little studies, because I had been spending so much time on bigger paintings, and I felt like I would paint it for so long and it's very labor intensive and not really filled with so much joy. And then the payoff of showing it off would just kind of come and go, and hopefully I'd sell it. But it felt really nice just to engage with people, little tiny bits that I could do pretty quickly. And, I can't do watercolors that fast anymore, but I swear that day, I did 3 or 4 of them just in a row, like, not effortlessly, but it felt good, just the energy to keep going. So I thought, like, this is something special. And I don't think I have a favorite medium at all. I really want to just be an oil painter. That's all really? I want to do. But I love watercolor. I really love it. I fell in love with it. And I felt like some kind of voice came through there that's still hard for me to find with oil paint. I find that you have so many choices with oil paint. You can literally do anything with it, that you have to make a lot of decisions, where watercolor is so scary that I try not to fight with it too much. And I kind of want to let it do its own thing. And that kind of developed into even if it's more tightly controlled now with some of the superhero stuff I've been painting, I really prefer more of a meeting between abstraction and realism. Just because, realism's really, really hard for me. And thought I
Really?
got pretty good at it.
I think
Yeah,
you're pretty good at
with
it. I don't
illustration. I appreciate
really.
that, but I think it's difficult. Yeah, I think it's really it's hard to get to a certain level of realism. You can get and the illusion of it, I think, fairly quickly. But yeah, like when I look at your stuff, or just I'm trying to think of people that really can just do it so almost effort. I don't want to say effortlessly because I know you put a lot of work
Yeah,
into
but
it.
that's the thing. It's like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm,
Someone is going to be listening to this podcast that I've already interviewed and think the same
mm-hmm.
thing I'm thinking. I'm thinking, yeah, it's hard for me, but it's not hard for Nick. Like, how could it be hard for Nick? I've seen his work. It doesn't look
That's
hard.
so hard.
Isn't that funny? It's like,
Yeah.
there was a time that I did a demo video many, many years ago. It was like, doesn't matter, but it might have been like 2010, long
Mm-hmm,
time ago. And when they were editing it, I was sitting there to do voiceover and I'm watching myself paint. And
mm-hmm,
it was so surreal because when I was outside of my body watching my hands in the video,
mm-hmm.
it looked like it was easy for me. But I remembered doing it. It wasn't easy.
It's so crazy how
Isn't it?
fast that can change if you're watching something, even if it is you.
Yeah,
Like,
because you
wow,
don't realize
look at
all
him
the
go.
pain in your head. It's like your hands make it. Like when I
Mm-hmm,
see my own hands, I'm like, yeah, it seems like he's just doing it right, right? But you don't. When you watch somebody paint, or when I look at work like yours, I don't feel the struggle that you must have had in your head. That's why you're saying this, I'm assuming, right?
mm-hmm.
Because
Of course.
painting is
Yeah.
all mental. And so none
Mm-hmm,
of us can really feel what you're feeling mentally when you're
mm-hmm.
going through the process of making a painting. And that's what I felt like watching myself paint. I'm like, oh, that's it. Because people have said to me, man, you make it look so easy. I'm like, it's not easy. I don't know why you say that. And then when I saw myself paint, I'm like, oh yeah, it's because you don't know the misery in my head. You can't see what's in my head.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
It does
weird.
make it look easy. It makes it look easy, and that's the thing. It's like
Yeah, exactly.
it's real magic, because magic is a trick. You're fooling somebody into thinking something's happening, but with a painting, it's really there. So
Yeah.
I think about magicians sometimes. I'm like, they never do art tricks because I don't think they can really fake that. They can't just come up with a painting.
Yeah, no
They can make
kidding.
it look like they're floating or something, but we know they're not floating, or they would be very dangerous. So it's like,
Yeah, no kidding.
but yeah, art is the real deal for sure.
Yeah. So how did you decide to do watercolor? You wanted to be an oil painter. Why did you just start tinkering around with watercolor? Because to me personally, watercolor is incredibly intimidating. I would
Mm-hmm.
not sidestep oil to do watercolor because
It's
it's more intimidating. Is it just me, or the rest of you guys also get weirdly excited when you order new paint? Because I don't know about you, but when I get paint in the mail, it feels like Santa just dropped my Christmas presents off at my doorstep. With Vasari paint, my paint of choice and the podcast sponsor, it's even more exciting. And let me show you why. Because when Vasari shows up, it comes in this incredible box where each tube lays in this little compartment perfectly formed around the tube in this nice soft foam. And it's surrounded by velvet, red velvet. Now you got to ask yourself, if a paint comes so carefully protected and surrounded by red velvet, you got to wonder if this paint is worthy of royalty. It is. Vasari is. So if you haven't tried Vasari, you're seriously missing out. And the thing about Vasari, it's not only the best paint out there, it's also made by an incredible company that's been around for 30 years and knows its customer by name. Do yourself a favor, go to vasaricolors.com and order yourself some for your next painting.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because it definitely is. I think I was so intimidated by the cleanup in like 24 of oil paint that
Oh
I
yeah,
just
that's true.
didn't. I just gave up so fast, like an idiot. Like, oh my God, this is because I was so used to water soluble anything.
Mhm.
Because mainly in comics, Alex Ross, he painted a lot of the superheroes in the early 90s. And he did it in a way that he would take photo reference. And as a kid, I thought, like, this looks really different. These look really believable, like actual human beings. And I remember he painted in watercolor and gouache. So it was really kind of a thing of wanting to be like him, where I had started with that and was just kind of more used to it. So I heard people talk about how scary it was, and gouache is a lot less scary than just pure watercolor, because, you know, you can treat it like that at first and paint really watered down with it. And then, but you can fix all your mistakes by going opaque over the top. And just pure watercolor, I thought, like, yeah, the same thing of it's scary, but it was the cleanup of oil that I just thought, like, I don't know if I can do this. And it's so stupid because there's a million videos of how to clean brushes and things like that. It's also the detail I found harder with oil paint at first, all those years ago. So I think I had these things in my mind that it's just a harder, more difficult, more serious medium, where I just thought, like, am I that skilled enough to be that serious yet with it? And I maybe should have just taken more workshops with it or something. But I think it was that just knowledge of water-based things that I thought, let me try a few different watercolors nowadays. And yeah, just seeing different people handle oil painting, in like Nicholas Uribe, looking at his stuff and seeing the shapes and everything. Yeah, he's one of my heroes painting, as far as people working right now. And it was that just style almost, and I thought, like, oh, that'd be cool in watercolor. And then of course I saw a painting of him by Benjamin Bjorklund, and I thought, like, oh, like, look at this. But I knew right away that, like, I can't paint like that person. There's no way that'll ever happen because of how he sees things, you know. And but I was really inspired and took a workshop and just thought, like, oh, this is fun to try this technique, you know, and there's no way I can ever do it like him. But it was that kind of freeness of not everything has to be totally finished in it. And then as long as it's kind of clean enough, some abstraction can be really messy with the watercolor. And I think it allows it to look more controlled than it actually is. And I think that was the real secret to getting into it more. So I'm like, if you let it do its own thing and find its own way, like, you still have to learn about how colors bleed into each other, or how a ton of water on the paper will dry different than less water on the paper, and all that. But as far as letting it kind of, if you look back at the watercolors from 2016, 2017, there's a lot of bleeding and a lot of cool experimentation going on that I wonder now if I could even get back to. And I want to try that again this year to try to kind of get back to a few more experimental things. If I can get some savings back with some of this superhero type stuff. Because that was the thing in the last couple of years, it's been more of a struggle, which is, again, out of nowhere, you know, but to keep just the personal art going. And I think coming back to some pop culture stuff is a smart idea. Just pay some bills, and it'll allow the other paintings to be even more experimental again, which is really what I'm longing for. Is kind of, I'm feeling a little bit like I did in 2014 again. Even though I haven't been doing a lot of illustration, I do want to start just really making weird stuff again. So that doesn't always bring in the money, you know.
Mm-hmm. So right now you're balancing your personal, I hate to say personal work, it's all personal work, but you're balancing,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, you're balancing your side projects and selling independently with selling commercially right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I thought, oh, I want to give it a try again with the comic book covers, you know, with Marvel or DC, because I didn't give up on it, but I got to write to a level where I was getting maybe good enough to try to pitch for work, and then just got other opportunities with more movie poster type things, just commissions and things like that. And I don't know, it's just a hankering I got again to try it out. And it seems just like a kind of a fun thing where if I'm not depending on it ruling my life like it was 20 years ago, and I really wanted to do that, I think there's more of a chance it could happen, or it could just be something fun and different to kind of, again, get me to start painting weird things again. I do want to do.
What do you mean by
more
weird things? What are your weird things? Like the skulls and that sort of stuff?
No, those, like, just, I would have to find specific pieces, I think, on my page. But things that are just, I guess to some people, they're not weird. They would be like, well, it's completely normal painting if they're more into an abstracted figure or a broken down figure, or I hate to say unfinished because it's purposely finished that way, you know, but and it looks maybe more unfinished or like a study. Those to me have just as much life. Yeah, something like that.
Your work,
As
by the
something,
way, so I just pulled up your slideshow. Your work on Google, it was frustrating because there's not a lot when I Google you. You have a ton of work on Instagram, but it was tough to find work on Google. So I hope this is satisfactory. But we'll look at
these are great.
Okay, good. We'll look at Instagram. It's a problem is if I'm finding as a podcaster that happens a lot because people post on Instagram and you can't copy that stuff. So the stuff you get off of Google is stuff that people have already shared.
See.
Yeah, I guess. I'm not totally sure, but anyway.
No, that makes sense. I always forget about the thing where you can't just grab it from Instagram.
Right. Yeah, yeah. But this is a pretty good sample. But yeah, is this what you mean here by this sort of
right there? Yeah, that
yeah.
one. I have that on my business card because I think that one is one of just my all-time favorites.
Oh, good.
Because it has enough realism into it to have that three-dimensional quality. I always want to kind of either want it to be purposely flat looking or really try to get that three-dimensional quality. I think we're all hoping for when we paint something. But yeah, just working from light to dark is interesting. And that was another thing I found with watercolor. There are a lot of rules people have in their mind or something. And they're, I think, a lot easier to break with watercolor than with oil, because oil is so much chemistry that sometimes, you can't just paint acrylic paint over the top of oil and stuff like that. It's not going to work.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But with watercolor, you can start with darker colors. You just have to think about the amount of water, and you have to think about the type of paper. Like hot press will just instantly lock it in. You can't really move it around. And a lot of watercolors just don't move anything. That's the absolute rules. Once it goes down, you leave it alone. But I don't care about that. And I'm really impressed by that. I wish I could just put the stroke down and be like, yeah, see, it's perfect. But even with watercolor, I scrub it away and I do all kinds of stuff. And sometimes I'll actually clean it up. There can be edges that are starting. And if you just take water and just re-wet the whole shape and kind of not scrub it, but just reactivate it, when it dries again, it sometimes pick up a little texture of the paper, but it'll be a nice smooth area. And so it was just a matter of getting really good paper. Arches or Fabriano, just cheap paper is horrible and it'll just tear up. But
so what paper do you use?
I use Arches cold press usually is my favorite.
Oh, so Arches isn't the cheap paper. That's what I thought you were saying. So
no.
Arches and Fabriano are good paper.
Yeah.
Okay. So Arches cold press. Someday I'm going to try watercolor.
Yeah, you should.
It's like I'm listening to you with so much empathy because you seem a little bit conflicted. Like there's all these different things you want to do with your life, and it's trying to find balance. That's the way I am, and it's just like there's not enough time in the day. There's not enough weeks in the month, months in a year just to get everything done. So that's really
you do a lot of things outside of I listened to the interview you did where you're kind of being interviewed. And you have a lot of projects going on outside of painting. I know you've talked to Sean Cheatham too, who I'm friends with, and you seem like you guys are.
Sean? He's a stud.
I don't know how you guys find the time to build all these things, and just they're so amazing and paint really well. It's like what?
Well, yeah, I don't. I have a lot of anxiety. That's how. That's what you get. You just work a lot and have a lot of anxiety. But someday I'll try it though. Someday I'm going to try watercolor. Yeah, because people like you make it just so inspiring. And so let's actually pull up your work.
Okay, great.
Right now. And I was actually really, you've described it already, but you haven't been coming up in my feed lately. Instagram is so annoying.
It's so weird with the algorithms.
I know.
I look at pages that I haven't seen in a long time, and I just want to tell people, I'm like, I swear I still love your work. I just
exactly. But then I come to your page, I'm like, what in the heck? This is totally different. But this is what you've been describing. You're going back into the superhero comic book stuff.
Yeah, it seems right now the page looks like I've just kind of switched over to that full time, but I haven't. I just wanted to kind of see if there was interest in it. Because over the years I've talked to a lot of my heroes in comics, kind of started to follow my painting work. And I thought that was flattering because I'm like, they're so much more talented with the drawing and everything that I've just started to communicate with them more, a few different artists. And I I thought like, well, maybe this might be a nice time to try, and people have been really positive. Um, so I'm just going to keep trying to do these and hope, just trying to build up the savings a little bit. And it's really challenging to try to draw these poses again. I mean, I'm using reference, but it only goes so far, and I'm really trying to draw a lot
Using
of the
reference. What kind of reference are you using for this stuff?
that's what I mean is like bodybuilders, people working out, but then you got to kind of use a lot of imagination and a lot
Okay.
of reference statues and things too. But I don't want to copy the statue. I want it to be a new thing because somebody would be like, "Hey, that's my statue," you know. So I'm really just looking at stuff like that for lighting reference and seeing like how big or small people have drawn different characters, and you know, with comics you can cartoon it quite a bit, and I kind of want to stay in more of the realistic realm. So yeah, I've tried that out recently, and it's been fun and challenging. And I think that whatever comes from it, just the challenge of trying to really relearn anatomy. I kind of learned it before a little bit, but to try to really learn it. So if I do use a reference, like I understand what I'm seeing, or I might be able to make it a little more dynamic or exciting. Because I really envy people who can just draw from their imagination, because it's such a
Yeah.
talent to draw from life, and it's such a talent to translate a photo. But to just come up with everything, you know, I don't know another place other than comics where people still do that at such a high level. So I feel intimidated by them again. It's a fun thing though to feel that and be like, I need to really practice with a lot of this stuff. And then bringing the painting into it helps a lot, because the scary part about rendering is not there, where that would have been the scariest part before. Is I may want to do some of these just in black and white and then have like a comic book colorist color them. If I actually did get some work, I think that would be a smart way time wise, because they can make the colors even brighter and crazier to the point where you might have to use like full acrylics or something and spend a ton of time on it. And then it's not worth whatever the publisher's going to pay for it, or whatever. If you get, I think, a cover to do an oil painting for a comic book, it's probably because you're a pretty big deal in comics, and they
Mm-hmm.
someone looking for that specific look, because it is so hard to do that stuff that fast. Most things are just colored digitally, painted digitally, but I just really love the having an original. It's what keeps everything going.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something about having something tangible that you can hold
Mm-hmm.
in your hand
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think digital just really could replace that. I think these are amazing. So,
Thank you.
geez, I could never even think of making something like this up. Did you follow Kim Jong-gi when he was alive?
I did.
Holy crap. That guy
It's
had
funny.
superpowers.
In 2013, I didn't know who he was yet, and the game
Mm-hmm.
company, they sponsored a few of the artists who worked there to travel together down to LA to go to, I think it was Noman Workshop, or I can't remember what the other name was of it, but they had a giant room filled with all these talented people like Jeremy Mann and doing paintings, oil paintings, and Kim Jong-gi just drawing. And I didn't know who he was, so I just was watching this absolute phenomenon happen in front of me that everybody else, of course, is like, oh, you don't know who this person is. And I'm like, felt like an idiot. But then when I looked up his stuff, I thought like, oh my God, I felt so lucky to watch him draw in person. And I don't even know how to start to think how he would,
I don't get
and
it. It doesn't
yeah, I
seem
don't,
like the human brain should be able
just
to
with,
do it.
it's with a brush pen. It wasn't even like there were no pencil lines or anything. That was, which, you know his work. It's just
Yeah, but
phenomenal. And to do it in a fisheye lens perspective is even crazier.
well, and he would like do these huge wall panels and he'd start with one cylinder on an engine block and then draw
Mhm.
half the engine and then start drawing an arm 6 inches away.
Yeah,
And they all come together to a person sitting in a convertible, like perfect perspective. Like, how is that even possible?
I have no idea. And just he wouldn't
Yeah.
take any shortcuts on foreshortening or anything. Just the hardest pose of like a female arm in perspective, and it's how small the hand has to be and everything. Like you do so many cool, sexy ladies and stuff, that really obviously spoke to like the comic book side of things. But yeah, just the most difficult pose you could ever imagine, it just from nowhere. So I don't know,
No,
when
it was mind blowing.
memorized a lot of looking at people or something, but I felt like it's just generating inside of him too. I feel like it's more than memory or something.
Yeah, he said it was just a good memory just from drawing and drawing and drawing, but I just find that I just don't think we all have that potential. I can't imagine.
My memory's horrible then. If that's like
So is mine. So is mine. Oh man. With if your memory is horrible, is anatomy sort of a thorn in your side a little bit?
oh, of course, yeah, because I don't, I just don't trust myself with it yet. In
Mm-hmm.
the last few years, going back to Zach Howard, a couple of years ago, I flew back to Colorado and was visiting, and I just asked him for, it was maybe only 20 minutes. I thought, man, can you just give me a crash course in how you start a figure from your mind? You know, 'cause he can pretty much draw anything. He uses reference because he's smart when he needs to get details of something, but he can draw any pose from his head.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped quite a bit because there's a lot of courses I've looked at online and things, and they're good, but just listening to him talk about the first couple lines he makes, like the shoulder line and the hip line, and how they shouldn't ever really be straight. You want to kind of have them, and that'll give the perspective. And feet are usually not just sticking out; they're usually pointing down a little bit because of perspective, and just like reminders that seem obvious, but I didn't remember any of that stuff. And so,
Mm.
over the last couple of years, I've tried now a lot to really start going back to Bridgman and then jumping to like even dumb books like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way have such phenomenal figures in there, that it's cool to look back at those, even though there's not a whole ton of information in that book. I remember having it as a kid, and looking back now, I really appreciate just how well all those figures are drawn, and Andrew Loomis and all that. But it's really, I think the challenge too is it's not just relearning maybe how to draw somebody sitting in a chair from my head or something, but yeah, flying at you, or this forced perspective, and you don't want it to look too much like a lens on a camera forcing the perspective. You really want it to that imaginative thing. So I don't know if it'll ever be as spectacular as I want it to be, but even if this doesn't go anywhere, I just think like relearning this stuff, going back to even observational painting, would probably make things go a little faster for me. It's as far as reiterating three-dimensional space and things like that. That I'm pretty good at observation, what's right in front of me, and I appreciate like the information you get painting from life. If you need to move a little, you just have so much more than the photo. But I know people who just paint, and I work a lot from photography, and it's really, in the end, I think, hard for me to tell the difference because they're so good at remembering painting from life that when they work from a photo, it's the same quality, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
all that. I think for me, learning backwards, like learning surface painting and all that, is different than most people learn anatomy first and get to that. And so even though it went backwards, I need to now do the other half just to, I think, satisfy myself right now and to see what happens over the next couple of years.
Yeah. You know, I had a similar experience to you. You mentioned earlier that you worked for a video game company for a short time, but you didn't play video games, so you didn't really feel like you fit in and all. I had the exact same experience. I worked for a video game company for 2 months, and they
Mm,
were so great, and there's so much talent there, like mind-blowing amount of talent. But I just didn't fit in. It wasn't for me. I just, I wanted to be a fine artist, and so I ended up quitting. But we had these open model sessions on occasion, and because a
mm,
lot of the people at the video game company wanted to be fine artists too, people had been there for many years. And it was
mm,
so interesting because they were so good at making stuff up. I mean, it was mind blowing. But then when we do the open model sessions, they didn't have the same skill level in drawing from observation. And
that's
so
true.
that's where I was better at drawing from observation. So I envied their skill of making things up, and they, seem to want to draw better from observation. It's just interesting how it's such a different part of the brain. It's like a different mental muscle that you have
It is.
to work
It
on.
is. Yeah, and I think that is a good thing to bring up, just how difficult it is to know what you're actually seeing versus what you're imagining, because it is, once you do, I think, unlock that imagination that I do see with comic book artists, it must be hard to then rein that back in, because not everything looks as idealized in reality, you know, and things
Mm-hmm.
play our brain, depending on, even with life, you're not seeing it through a lens, because lenses can obviously distort things so much. That I think painting from life is the ultimate challenge to me, to really paint what you're seeing, since it can move and shift and things. It's very difficult. Yeah, I think for people who are used to that looseness of either cartooning something, or even if it's realistic, the looseness of sketching it out and then kind of tightening it from there, versus reality is as tight as it's going to get. And it's really, you're trying to mimic that. And, that's a good point, that everybody kind of envies other people, even
Yeah.
though we're pretty, like, we're all so skilled. So it's a fun thing, though. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have all of it. It really would be nice to have all of it. I would love to be able to paint more from imagination, because I just find that, yeah, just an amazing skill. I think what you're doing from imagination, I mean, I realize you're using some reference, but obviously you, like with this Spider-Man here, obviously I can't imagine you're tying someone to the ceiling or something. So,
No.
I've been doing Jeff's online mentorship program for about a year now, and it is awesome. Everything is online, super streamlined. If you can be there, I mean, you have the ability to talk to him once a week and he can review your work and help you. If you can't be there, it's pre-recorded. You can go back and even re-watch things if you missed something during class or couldn't be there. So the online portion of it is almost better than real life, because you can always go back to it, which is awesome. The demos are recorded. It's just like all available whenever you need it. And I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4, and my time is limited, and it's also very interrupted. And so to be able to go back has been clutch for me. And you get to work with Jeff HEIN, who's awesome. He's tough. The assignments are simple, but difficult, and they're difficult to make us all better. And he's able to give us these assignments, coach us through it, help us stay excited to progress. And so it's just been a great experience. I am so grateful that he has been willing to take time away from his own art to offer all of us to have it. So if you're thinking about doing it, it's amazing.
To learn more about how you could have me as a personal mentor, check out the link to HEINatelier.com in the show notes or video description.
That one, I think the reference was more people doing, that one was just like somebody jumping. But then when I changed it, when I tilted it, I thought, like, well, that the torso in that photo is not looking great. So it was a kind of a thing of finding reference for like the head and stuff. And these first ones, it's kind of, they are a little more stiff even than where I want to go, because it is like build back up into that and really think, like, trying to look through the leg and be like, all right, this does line up, and will this twist this way? Does that make sense? And if it doesn't, I'm not doing it, you know, because in the past I might be like, it looks all right, like, go for it. But it's just embarrassing yourself later, because someone who's really good at anatomy will just instantly see that. And I'm sure they see problems in these here too, but you know, it's that balance of all these different voices in my head screaming, like, make it more dynamic, make it more static, do all these different things that all have their strengths, I think, in comics or illustration. So yeah.
what about lighting? That I find that one of the more difficult things about working from imagination, because if you're just borrowing a head from one photo, legs from another, torso from another, how do you put the lighting together so it looks convincing? It's obviously not going to be naturalistic, or maybe it could be, I don't know, but at least looks three-dimensional.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I always try to think of where the light source is coming from in the references, and hopefully they're similar. But if they're not, then it's a matter of kind of lightening up the shadows. And like, sometimes obviously the light is dictating the shape, so you can't screw around with that. It just won't make sense. But a lot of the times you can just lighten up a shadow, I find, a little bit, and then put like that highlighted rim lighting around the edge that doesn't take a whole lot of knowledge. You kind of find the muscle and then think, like, all right, go in a little bit from there. And it kind of that rim lighting, and that if that's really bright, it kind of will dictate the brightest light source. And as long as the dark shadows kind of all are the opposite of that, I find that it will be convincing. And I do think of Drew Struzan, where he's using all these different references that were sent from the studio that have different light sources in them, and he has to all put that together into a poster with one light source or two or three or whatever, if they're coming from different angles, but they've all got to be consistent. And I think looking at his stuff and just the way, when I see the photo of Indiana Jones that everybody's seen, and I see his painting of it, even if the photo just matches the proportions identically and all that kind of stuff, it's not super creative. The way he adds in those highlights, and I know people go crazy over the lines and the textures and stuff, but it's really the light he added in. And I just think, like, how does he see it that way? And I think it is a matter of finding a little bit of the highlight and just accentuating it, or putting the light source right on the edge where it might just kind of actually be behind the figure or something. And you don't have to take a ton of risk being like, God, if it's in front of them, it's going to cross over and hit the nose and all this kind of stuff. And then it's too bright and all that. So it is just a lot of kind of tiptoeing with these, and a lot of failures where I posted these. And I still, as soon as I post these two, I'll look back and be like, damn, I see something in it.
Yeah, we all do that.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. Oh, man. So, okay. And then tell me about this work. This work I wasn't familiar with either. This is wild.
Yeah, I've always loved the idea of multiple moments in one. And I think this stuff does actually tie back to what I've been doing for the last like 10 years, but these are a little more just cleaner, more polished or something. I think as the watercolor, as I've gotten more used to it, certain things
you seem to be controlling the shapes more, almost like you're masking.
Yeah, it's surprising how much just the edge of the brush will give such a, if you just glide, almost like not even touching the paper, like try to not touch the paper when you go across it. It'll give the cleanest, craziest, straightest line sometimes. And other times the lines are a horrible disaster when I do that. But that even comes back to comic book inking and learning. That's where I really learned to use fine brushes, was trying to do line work inking. So bringing that back to this, I think I just am always fascinated with like Alex Kanevsky and those type of painters, where he does break it down in the end to one figure usually, but then some of those multiple figure ones he did were just so inspiring. One's in the bathtub with that red background, and I think those are probably from maybe 10 years ago or something. I just love that. And even if it's, and Zoe Frank too, the way she combines just all those figures into one thing, and it's chaos, but it's not bad. Your eye is not overwhelmed by it. It can still do, so these are not at all compared to that quality. I couldn't imagine being able to paint like her. That's amazing.
It's apples and oranges. You can't even compare.
It's very different.
Yeah, it's very, very different. Yeah, man, these are cool. These are real cool. So do you do a drawing with pencil ahead of time?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do really drawing with pencil. And a lot of I don't have a lot of the movie poster stuff up on my page now. It's because some of the commissions were not licensed, so I didn't. They don't care that much, the studios, unless you're making huge print runs or something. But the alternate movie poster crowd is pretty cool and pretty much tolerated. But with those, like the movie poster stuff was all just traced, projected stuff.
Okay. Is that just to speed things up, just to get the work out?
For likenesses for celebrities, I could sit there and drawing the face to get it perfect. Like with these, I try to draw these freehand for sure. To just because they're just for me, so I'm not really. There's no point really in trying to project something like that. If something's really gigantic or something, and I've made a really nice small drawing, then it's decide, do I draw the grid on and freehand it with that, which is kind of halfway between freehand and or project it or whatever. And right now I don't have a very reliable projector, so I don't know. I just the small scale, it's fun to just try to pencil them, and I want to make that. And with the portraits, it's always usually freehand, because I want them to get away from the photo, and maybe I don't want the proportions exactly like the photo was and things like that. So even with these, I see stiffness in certain parts of them that I think like, oh, I would maybe try to not cordon off that edge as much or leave that part open, or some things that I try to do on the paper. It's maybe not the smartest technique. Like it might be smarter to try to work this out in Photoshop first or something.
That
But
was
I
my
just,
question. Yeah,
yeah, I
you
usually
work
try to,
this out. You work this out real time. You're not doing it ahead of time in Photoshop.
what I do sometimes in Photoshop is I will hover a photo over the other ones. I use an old version of Photoshop, so for a second it shows it translucent, and you obviously you can just do that by pulling a layer in and doing the opacity and all that. But I find when I have tried to do that, it ties me down to it too much. I fall in love with it too much, and then when I'm recreating it, I'm like, yeah, but that bright spot is right there, and in my mind I think, but I want to put paint over that, and I just don't do it. So with this, I will kind of hover them over to see if they are going to fit at all, or if they're in the right, if they're making the movement in the right space and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it comes to actually drawing them and painting them, I keep 3 or 2 or whatever separate photos. And I just know that based on how big they are and the shape of the page, that this one has to be drawn first, and I'll do that. And then I'll draw another one in. And then sometimes when it's like the third figure, I think like, is this making it too busy now? And a lot of these in the end, I don't, not a lot, I'd say, but some of them I don't love how they come out. But I don't think I could plan this ahead. And that's why I do it that way. It's not just to be crazy or something, but it's a balance of I'll start with green or red in this case, and then I'll start to get a little tired of it, or I think it's not balanced enough. There's too much in one area, and then I'll switch to the other color. And I'm just thinking of it. Sometimes I'll turn the photo black and white so that I'm not tied to the local colors and stuff, especially with these bizarre kind of, they're monochromatic, but then there's 2 colors, so
Yeah.
Anyway, rambling a bit here.
Yeah. Is that ever anxiety inducing, not knowing where you're going? Just sort of, is it?
I don't always love painting. I just love the painting in the end. Other times I have a great time with it. It's weird.
Oh yeah, that's exactly how I am. In fact, on the podcast some months ago, I was interviewing somebody and talking about how I don't feel like I have a passion for it. And then now today I do. Like for the past few months, I've been so into it. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Why? I can't believe I said that on the podcast. It's just this weird ebb and flow, this cycle I go through where it's like, oh, painting is just hard. And then other times you're like, I can't wait to get up and get painting again. It's strange.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that sometimes I think an idea will be so strong that when I start painting, it is more relaxing, because I know that even if the rendering in certain areas maybe doesn't turn out to be perfect, I always want to try to make it that way. But if it doesn't, I know the idea is so strong that I know I'm going to be happy with the painting, where other times, yeah, it seems like a dark tunnel and they're just looking for the light at the end, and I don't always find it. So sometimes the light at the end is throwing something away and being free from it, but I try not to.
Yeah, no joke, right? Never showing it to anyone.
Yeah, it's a nice freedom. Like, the world will never have to like maybe secretly see all the problems I do and then think that I don't know them already or something,
Yeah, man. Yeah, these are just gorgeous, dude. Seriously.
Thank you.
All right, I want to pull up some of the work that I am more familiar with that was coming up in my feed a few months ago.
Yeah, I think when we first talked about this podcast, even a lot has changed.
Yeah, it probably has. Yeah, because I would have seen it then. Man, okay, these koi paintings are gorgeous. Their color is just beautiful.
Thank you.
Man, oh man.
I think these are kind of what led me into the superhero stuff, which doesn't mean I don't want to get back
That's
to
odd.
these.
Seriously?
The colors and the movement, and I thought like, well, this, I don't know, it's not that I imagined these as that kind of stuff, but it was just a thing of like, wow, the Daniel Smith watercolors really are really bright, and you can put them down really opaquely and they don't seem to fade that much when they dry. So, and the light fastness, I have paintings still, I don't know if they're kept in direct sunlight what would happen, but I have watercolors now from 12 years ago and stuff that I still look back at and they look fine. So I think it really is a matter of, unfortunately, the more expensive stuff with watercolor is better. I think with oil paint, you get away sometimes. Doesn't mean cheap oil paint is better than, you know, Williamsburg or Michael Harding or something, but I think you can get away with cheaper oil paint mixed into things a lot easier than the light fastness on bad watercolor. It will vanish, especially red.
Really? No kidding.
Yeah, it'll go away. If you keep it in a drawer with no light on it, it might not. But then I think other yellowing and things can happen to paper. And I'm still learning a lot about just watercolor paper. I feel like that's the key to all of it. Is how it flows across that. And I think a lot of people do like hot press more because it keeps those details so fast, but I get scared to death of it because, again, you can move stuff around a little bit with cold press. I find that it kind of dries up.
With hot press, you mean?
Well, nice. On cold press.
Oh, okay. I thought you were making an exception. You can move it around a little bit on hot press. That's what I thought you were saying. Okay.
Yeah. I
No,
jump back and forth.
on cold press. So on cold press, you're saying you can move it around, but not hot press.
Yeah, hot press, it stays pretty quick. It's harder to move it, which is really good if you want little tiny crisp details in a face or something. If you're painting a big illustration scene, you don't want anything moving or bleeding or flowing too much. But I find that I do want that quite a bit. That if I get a really hard edge and then another hard edge crosses over it, that's what drives me crazy. I really hate that. Some watercolors are built up, and my older ones, I kind of did play with that more, building a lot of crossover edges to get a certain thing. But I don't know, I guess it's just taste over time changes or something. And I like a little bit cleaner look now, but I still appreciate the power of kind of just letting the paint do what it wants in certain areas. And then it makes other areas look even cleaner if you have chaos right next to it.
How do you, well, actually, I want to save that question for a minute because I wanted to ask you about this. Are you familiar with Allie Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Okay, she paints on some kind of panel. I wish I remembered. She talked about it during her podcast, but it's some sort of panel that she and a company put together. It might have been golden, might not.
Oh.
But if you listen to the podcast, she talks about it. I don't know. So obviously you haven't used that one yet, that panel.
No, I'll have to listen to that episode.
She swears by it. She says it's just a miracle surface for watercolor, but I suppose that's a subjective thing.
Some of the best watercolor I've ever seen, definitely.
No, she's good. Yeah, she's really good. So you said, what's that?
I said she was definitely an inspiration at first too.
Oh, no kidding. That's awesome.
So realistic that I was honestly kind of scared off by it. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to do that with watercolor? You know, but.
Oh, and then there's like Nick Alm. Talk about realistic. You familiar with his watercolors? Holy crap, man. But that, again, that's apples and oranges. He's after naturalism, like absolute naturalism. At least that's the way it seems to me looking at his work.
Yeah, it's that quality that like Zorn, that I'd see with Zorn and stuff. Just not playing around with artificial lighting or anything, and a lot of outdoor scenes. Yeah, Nick Alm is fantastic with watercolor. Some of the stuff he does, I just don't even believe it's watercolor at first. And then you look close and you're like, yeah, it is.
I know. I'm often fooled by his work. So you said that red is more likely to fade?
I don't know. Don't quote me on that. The watercolor experts might disagree, but I find that certain reds, I remember working at Blick for a little while in 2018, with a part-time job. Bringing some cash and having to sell watercolor paint. I started, little tubes of the cheap stuff. I think I don't want to like talk down on brands, but I would take some of the samples home so we could get discounts on stuff and try it and leave it outside and see which colors would go. And reds, I found that they didn't disappear from the paper, but they changed a lot.
Wow.
And certain just went like manganese blue. If it's not from Winsor Newton or Daniel Smith, it almost is just gone. So,
that would be so disappointing if you spend days on a painting and then it just disappears.
Yeah, but they've figured it out with these brands because, you don't want. It's another thing is I think people think of watercolor as a less important medium because it is fugitive, but it's like over how long? If you get the right paints, it will take forever. And I think with the William Blake paintings are watercolor, and obviously they're kept out of the light and stuff, but those are from the 1700s and they still look okay. So
I wasn't even familiar with that. I didn't know that watercolors were known for being fugitive. That's
what I've heard from people who have auctions and things, is that it's going to fade way, or it's on paper. They'll use the word paper as like an insult. I think, geez, no, it's the same thing as talking down on somebody painting digitally. I'm like, it's really, really hard. You know, they have a print and they'll print it out in the end or whatever. It's not AI or something. It's still painting. It's really, really difficult. And that's what I think, like with watercolor, it's like, it's just paint. And I've kind of avoided watercolor societies and clubs and stuff like that. Not that I think they're bad, but I just want it to hold its own with all of the other mediums, or I want acrylics to be appreciated more too. I've seen some of the most amazing work ever with acrylics. And I think oil has that certain quality that's just so fun and just so buttery, and you can choose how long it is to dry and things. That it's probably always going to lead the way as far as collectability. But yeah, the whole importance thing, I think, yeah, that kind of irks me a little bit sometimes, because I think, like, yeah, when they say it's that price, but it's just watercolor, I think, like, all right.
Yeah, that would burn me too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, I don't see it that way.
I'm like, I want to paint more with oil again today. I'll probably do something more personal art today. I have a piece in between all the superhero stuff. I have a piece I've been wanting to show that I need to get photographed. Just
wait, where is it? Can you hold it up to the camera?
Oh, not yet.
You're not ready? Okay. I was hoping for a reveal.
Paint it over one of the faces, and I need to like redo that part. Pretty soon, though.
This is oil right here, right?
Yeah, all the skulls are oil, and those are fun.
All the skulls are oil?
No, it's all the recent skulls.
Oh, all the recent ones. Okay, I'm like, am I losing my mind? Okay.
Yeah, no, there are quite a few watercolors. Sorry.
So when you do something like this, are you lighting it with multiple light sources, or is this all just throwing in color just spontaneously?
That one was thrown in color spontaneously, but the light source was definitely like it was a regular local colored photograph I used. But the light source there. And I think I had painted a few just monochromatic ones with the green. I mean, I know I did. And that's what gave me the confidence to just try that again. Of just like, we'll make I think it'd be a lot scarier if this was lit with color, because it would give me information. But then again, like it ties me to it. And then I start feeling bad about myself when I'm not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And that where this is like anything that goes down, as long as it looks okay next to the other colors. But this is chaos. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I just know that these colors have worked together on other paintings. And I just think, yeah, I'm very envious of people who really understand how colors work together. I think I have a feeling about it.
Yeah, I think you're one of those people, man. You're far too humble.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. That's one of the things that's great about your work is your incredible sense of color and design. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, that means so much.
That looks like it would be fun, because I know what you mean, because I, as you probably know, if you look through my website, I've done a lot of portraits where I have a secondary light source that's kind of bright colored light. And you're right. You know, it's hard. It's sometimes the transitions, let's say you're lighting it with blue and the face is on the cool side and the warm side is lit with warm. And then when they join together, it's this kind of ugly gray shadow, and you got to kind of figure out how to transition, you know, and it's like, I could see why it would be more fun to just ignore all that and just do the color that looks the most interesting.
Yeah, because it's like, it doesn't necessarily make sense, but I think the value hides it well enough where you're like, well, it does look like the same value, even though that color would probably never ever happen, like you said, in reality. When the two colors cross over in the shadow, it does make that kind of ugly gray thing. And then even there, if I had the reference, or if it was like a live model with colors on them, I may cheat in the shadow and just be like, you know what, I'm putting more purple in there because it's a painting. So I don't know what the rules we set for each painting are. And to tell someone to paint a certain way is crazy because everybody's different. But then I think it is good sometimes for each individual painting to be like, all right, for this one, I'm really not going to move the brush strokes around. For this one, that's all I'm going to do. You know, let's mix on the painting and stuff. I do like to mess with that too, because I can't decide if I want to have the mixed palette that's always the same colors around the top that so many master painters use, and they clean away the area. Or the thing of cleaning away completely and mix all the colors first. And it's hard to figure that out for me. So I think for smaller paintings, I don't pre-mix the colors, and then for bigger ones, I just need to, just to keep some kind of order with it. And I remember using acrylics a lot. It was really hard because the paint would dry. So there's all these little plastic cups with snappable caps and stuff to make a certain acrylic color and keep it over a few days, and always have it ready, and I just never have enough, and trying to remix it then was crazy. So I do appreciate that with oil paint. These were done with a lot of Galkit because I just wanted them to be done, and I wasn't super worried about.
I was wondering that because they look like acrylic almost, like they look like they dried fast.
Yeah, like I'm not super afraid of the flat shapes sometimes because I want to make the illusion of it with just the flat shapes and still make the illusion of three-dimensional quality. And other times I really would like to get more into more impasto and more adding more sculptural quality to the oil painting, because that is the beauty of oil paintings, is seeing them in person really just can't be matched. How the light changes when you walk past it, and all of the sculptural quality of so much paint that some people use. Because when you photograph it, you're really getting one of a million versions of it at that point. Because if you change the lighting a little bit, you get cool shadows and stuff like that. So I think at this point in my mind, just to quiet all that stuff down, I just paint kind of flat, like wash or something.
So this is sort of a predictable question, but I'm curious in your case. What inspires you from day to day? Because your work is really diverse. And I mean, there's consistency across your whole body of work, which is awesome. But also it's like, when you get up in the morning, where do you get your ideas from? I mean, how do you decide whether to draw 3 women overlapping and abstract their intersections versus throwing a skull up there and just making up color, or a koi painting? I mean, it seems from my perspective almost arbitrary, but at the same time remarkable, because the ideas just keep seeming to flow from my perspective. What is your inspiration?
I think it's hard to answer. Yeah, I have just so many, I think, references either in files or on the computer and none of those really are dictating to me that this should be an oil painting or watercolor. But sometimes when I'm having no real ideas, I will just kind of look through folders of images and kind of get a feeling of like, today, am I more interested in texture and form, or am I more interested in storytelling and the subject matter? And
when you say images, do you mean other people's paintings or reference images?
Usually like reference images I've taken. And sometimes, yeah, I keep a ton of files of just other people's paintings to just inspire, like, oh, like, wow, I love the way that color worked there with this other color, or this composition is not something I thought of. And yeah, it's hard to tell. I think usually lately, unfortunately, a lot of the decisions, even though the paintings have been nice, have just come from fear, just trying to get savings back. So it's like I feel more like a gambler than like a painter, where I'm like, I'm going to try to guess what somebody wants to see and try to turn that around fairly quickly, because I think that commissions are amazing. And every time I get into something that I know, it's like the grass is always greener or something. Like, well, I'll do this now, and that will solve all the issues. And then I get into that, I'm like, oh, wow, I really like doing that other thing now. I'm going to go back to that. I'm like, what's wrong with me? You know, it's a lot of asking what's wrong with me. I just envy people who have consistent styles so much. Like, I feel that's the key to get gallery work and to be collectible.
You don't think you have a consistent style?
I think when I want to, but it's just like, I don't know who to be, you know? I want people to be like, oh, that's a Nick Runge painting. And I think sometimes that's hard because they're like, well, which Nick Runge? You
know? That's so funny. I love this. I don't know, man. I think you look like yourself. I mean, I get what you're saying, because, you know, you're drawing Spider-Man and skulls and koi. So the subject matter does vary significantly, but your aesthetic sensibilities are consistent.
Thank you.
So I don't know. I think you found yourself. But I
think
get what you're saying though.
Yeah, I think it takes an outside eye. I'm sure that I could look at people's paintings and be like, well, of course that's a Jeff Hein, but you might think like, well, that one looks so much different than that one that you did a few years before that you don't even want to compare them. And even with all the diversity on my Instagram page, it's incredibly curated. I take a lot of stuff down because I just think like, I know people would be excited about this one, but it bothers me quite a bit now, certain parts of it. That's the thing. It's like, I know the joy is still there. I don't want to steal that from people, but I get so nitpicky with being like, if someone sees that damn hand at that wrong angle, like the world will end, It's like, I just feel like, no. And then I take it down and I'm like, what did I do? And so it's a lot of, I could just do stand-up. I'm not good enough to do stand-up comedy, but there could be some bit about that, It's like,
It's cracking me up because you're just so transparent about what all of us think. It's so, I mean, I think all of us do. I certainly relate. It's hilarious.
I hope so.
The anxiety. That's part of the reason I don't even do Instagram. I'm like, I don't want people to see my work. I just want the person who's buying it to see it. And then I'm good. It's like, it just sucks. No one needs to see it. That's kind of where I'm at.
What I know that like, if I saw the one that you're like, I'm not it, I'd be like, it's phenomenal. But it's like, yeah, sometimes even compliments, if you're not feeling a piece and everyone loves it, it's a crazy feeling,
Yeah.
Versus the horror, it's not as bad, I guess, as the other way. And you really fall in love with something and people are like, like that's it, huh?
Oh,
but
that's the worst. Yeah. You work so hard, you think it's your winning piece, and no one seems to care.
That story you told about your first art teacher, how she gave you a worse grade than the guy who did a terrible job.
Oh, is that the podcast you heard? Dude.
It's like, that seemed very intense. And I think if that happened to me, I don't know if I would come back from it. So like, I salute you for just saying the hell with that, going back to it.
This episode is brought to you in part by Rosemary Brushes. If you're one of my listeners who's a professional artist, you're already using Rosemary Brushes. But for the rest of you, come on. Take your work a little more seriously. Stop buying the other brands. It's just not worth it. Every now and then you may get lucky and buy a good brush from another brand, but use the brand that professionals like myself are using. Go to rosemaryandco.com, link in the description or the show notes, and get yourself some quality brushes before your next painting.
Oh, no. I hope I didn't, give a false impression. I was crushed. And I never took another art class. I mean, she just crushed my soul. So for the audience who hasn't heard that, let me just reiterate that story real quick. So I was in the 9th grade, I think. No, maybe 10th grade. And I was a really shy kid when I was in high school, believe it or not. And I was sitting in class, and the kid next to me was a football player, huge dude, and he didn't even care about art at all. He didn't want to be there. All he cared about was, I don't know, football, And we got our first assignment, and we had to draw like a car ad, like an illustration for a car ad with a woman leaning up against the car. And then, don't ask me why. And then we had to rule the text underneath it. And I spent all night on it. And then I bring it back the next day. They collect all the assignments. Oh, before they collect the assignments, the football player brings back a box with 2 circles that he scribbled in 2 seconds flat with a stick figure for a woman, and then just scribbles for the text. He totally made a joke out of it. Anyway, then a couple days later, we get our grades back, and he got a higher grade than I did. And so I went into her office really scared because I was super shy and intimidated by school in general. And I said, Mrs. So-and-so, I just was wondering why so-and-so got a higher grade than me, because I really worked hard on this. And she started yelling at me, like literally yelling, saying, you can't expect special treatment just because you have talent and he doesn't. Or something to that effect. Yeah.
I remember you saying that you didn't go back to her class.
No, I went right to the guidance counselor, dropped the class. I never took an art class. So that was my one assignment of my one art class ever until college. So the only reason I got I don't know why I still stayed in art. Well, I think as I matured, I hung on to the you've got talent, not the, you got a bad grade. Like, in a way, she complimented me, you know. And she said, but because I resent you for having talent, I'm going to give you a lower grade, is what I learned later in life. You know, as I grew up, as I got older, I started realizing this woman was really insecure and was threatened by a talented student. So, so that's
I
why.
think she might have thought she was teaching a good lesson of like, but I don't think you expected special treatment. You're like, this person failed the assignment.
He didn't even try.
Yeah, this is not a talent discussion. This is like, do the assignment discussion. And then you also had talent. So she saw that. It was like, I will punish this kid. It's sad. You know?
It was weird, man. It was weird.
Having a dad who was an art teacher, if I told him that story, you know, he might listen to the podcast, he would absolutely be like, what, are you trying to teach them art or not? You know? So
I know.
Absolutely disagree with that approach, but you're here now. So it's like coming back to it. Maybe that did give you the fuel to,
I don't know.
Not
yeah,
like
it certainly didn't crush my self-esteem. It made me angry. So I might have been shy, but I wasn't stupid. You know, I realized that she was out of her mind, you know. But anyway, how do we get on that? I feel like that was a major tangent. I apologize. I'm totally lost now.
Drifted into it.
All right, well, let's just go back to your work here. What's that?
I think we were talking about anxiety and how we choose different subjects.
Yeah. Well, that was anxiety inducing. That's for dang sure. Holy moly. All right. You did so many skull paintings, but there's some of my favorite. I want to go down to some of the watercolor skulls I remember you doing.
Yeah, the oil ones recently were a project that it took a lot longer than I thought it'd take, but people were so nice about it where they could pre-order one with a specific color scheme. And I laid out 8 or 9 color schemes, just ideas based on old paintings, and people kind of order those, and then they'd be a surprise. It'd be kind of make sure that they want a green one, it's green, but other than that, surprises. And
really,
so yeah, they're fun to paint. And
so I'm confused. I thought, because I've always seen you as mostly a watercolor painter, that a lot of your skulls were watercolor, but they're not.
Yeah, these are oil.
No joke. Do you even have any skulls that are watercolor?
If you keep going like that one is on if you go back up.
Okay, I'm not losing my mind. These are the ones I remember. Yeah.
I think at first, I just started to just do them with either one, but then when the pre-order thing came in, I wanted to make sure everybody got the same thing they ordered. So, and again, it's getting into oil again. But yeah, and I love lines, and I'm like, should I just always crosshatch and the hell with painting? And the next day, I'm just like, no.
That is a constant battle. You do something good. You know, I'm doing that with my painting right now. It's like I'm painting this little boy, and it's a 10-foot painting, and I'm painting this little boy, but I keep on feeling like the way I paint his flesh needs to be different than the way I painted the woman's flesh across the canvas. And I'm having this inner battle as to whether or not that's okay. Like, am I the painter who paints flesh this way, or do I paint it the way I painted to the other lady? And it's this constant inner battle. And I keep having to tell myself, it doesn't matter. Like, just paint it the way you want to paint it today. But then I say, well, but what if it does matter? It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't matter. But then I get what you're saying. Our brain is like, yeah, but then will it match the look of the other figure? And like, does that matter? You know, and like,
or that's not the way I paint. I paint like the other figure, and now I'm painting different. That's not me. You know, it's like, well, man.
It's a constant. That is a constant battle of. I think we become a separate thing sometimes in ourselves, and we have like. I find that I'm like, what would I do? And I'm like, do whatever you want to do. You know, I don't think it's predetermined. Maybe, I don't know, but it's just like, yeah, it's hard to. It is. I think that question you asked is really good. Like, how do I come up with ideas? I'm like, I don't really know. It's like the whim of the moment, and I don't think it's a thing of like waiting around for inspiration, because that just will, for me, never show up. I'm either always inspired all the time or just never. So waiting around for it, I just think like, Nick, you better draw something today. You know, like.
So sometimes if you don't wake up with an idea, you just go to the computer or a file or whatever and start pulling up photos until something clicks.
Pretty much, yeah. Or now you have cameras too. Sometimes I'll go out and just think like maybe, because I'm always drawn to humans, I think more. But I really also envy landscape painters and plein air painters. And I think like maybe today is.
Have you done any plein air painting?
In the past, I did a little bit, but I don't think I have any of it on here really. And that's something I really do want to get into more because just of the small size too. I know some plein air painters work bigger, but I like the idea of. I bought Tad Rhett's little box.
Oh, you did? I just had him on. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't. I have to.
Yeah, we talked about his box. Yeah, we talked about it. I think he was last week. Or no, it was 2 weeks ago. He does some of the
all-time best plein air stuff I've ever seen.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah. So chunky, thick, beautiful paint. Yeah.
And the colors are everything's so accurate and just believable too. It's cool.
Yeah, but he improvises a lot, he said. So, yeah, so it's, if I remember right, man, dude, it's all a blur. It's really getting sad. I think you're like 130 and it's just becoming a blur. The first 50 or so, I remembered everything. And then after that, it just started going downhill. Like so-and-so said something. I don't know what they said. I can't remember. But I am learning a lot. I just can't keep track of who said what anymore. But I'm pretty sure he said that he improvises quite a bit.
It would be cool to see. I know he's posted a lot of photos of what he's looking at too, but sometimes obviously the photo looks different and it'd be interesting to just be over his shoulder sometimes while he's painting.
Yeah, no, I'm sure of it because there was one painting he did that he's like, yeah, that photo is exactly like that. And it was just a perfect composition. And then And I questioned him about that. I was like, so that's not typical. He's like, no, I'm changing things up all the time. But I think that's kind of typical of landscape painters too, I'm finding, as I do these interviews. This one is so beautiful. Do you still have this one? I'm sure it's sold.
I think that one's sold.
Bummer.
That was kind of not an accident. I wanted to try to take that one to a more realistic level, but I was getting a little frustrated with it being. I put the blue over the red, which usually, light to dark, but sometimes those weird glazes, the manganese blue from Daniel Smith and from Winsor & Newton, I kind of use them interchangeably. It's so translucent. There's not a lot of grit or anything to it. It's so light that if you get a ton of it in the brush and like enough water and just go very quickly, like once you get to the end, around the eye sockets and stuff, it might start to pull the red around a little bit. But if the red's completely dry, it really won't disturb it at all. And it just cooled it down just enough to make it look like cold bone or something. And that's kind of is at the end where like I wasn't going to destroy them, but I was not happy. And then it's like, well, I don't care enough about it to treat it as a sacred thing. Like, let's put blue over it. And I guess this is going to kill it. And then after that, I put more red over the top of it again to get that more detailed look in the teeth and stuff. But,
that's funny. The thing that was an accident is the thing that I'm most drawn to.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. And I think that a lot of times it does kill the painting and I throw it away. But whenever it doesn't, it usually is that. A lot of times it's been that blue. I don't know why, but it seems to, even if it doesn't necessarily go exactly with the colors I'm using, if it's not too far off, it does something to it.
Is this the blue right here that you glazed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I put that down, that was one big shape, and then I just left out a little bit of the white paper right under that left cheekbone, and it makes it look like there's just that one brush stroke there, but that's actually one big shape. And a lot of the times these flat shapes are not done with a big square flat brush, but with like a pointed brush, and I just make the edge of the shape really nice. Because I started with flat brush first. Yeah, but then I couldn't
carefully control the edge of the shape.
I try to, because I'm just so used to, again, comic book inking and small brushes and painting with little brushes. And I know in most painting classes, you start with a big brush first. But I don't know. I've done a lot of things incorrectly, and just in the end,
there's no correct, right? It's just what matters is the finished product. This one's sick too.
Well, thank you.
That is so good. That one's also sold, I'm assuming.
I think all of the skull. I don't think I actually have any skulls right now.
I love your skulls.
It's like a portrait, but you don't have to worry about what someone might think about the look of that specific person. And I
Yeah,
find that
that's
if
never bothered me, but I'm a painter. And painters, you know, I have a bunch of portraits in my house from different artists, and we have friends who are also collectors. And I
Mhm.
can tell when they look at my collection that they're kind of weirded out that I have pictures of strangers in my house. I'm like, they're beautiful.
Yeah,
Like,
it's the
but
art.
is it family? I'm like, no, it's not family. It's just a woman holding her shoes. Like,
I think it's one of the biggest things about people looking at art is what they're seeing, and it doesn't mean that they have to look at it a certain way. But I often wonder with things like, are people really just drawn to the subject matter and then they notice the art, or is it the art? Because with us, I assume it's like what you just said. I notice the art first, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, it's an old man or whatever. And I don't mean it's like the Matrix, like I'm just seeing
yeah,
the code, but I really, yeah, the color and composition will jump at me. The lizard brain is activated by the color and composition, and then the brush strokes, and then in my mind, after all of that, I'll notice the subject matter. And obviously, like offensive subject matters or something, they're gonna pop out and just rub somebody the wrong way or me. But
right.
for the most part, yeah, the art is everywhere, and I think that's why it's easier for me to just do all these random subjects. Is I just want to get to the art part. So I do care about the subject matter. Not to say that I don't, but it is kind of secondary to just, art is like the word artist. It's so subjective that saying art
It is.
is like, it's kind of lazy sometimes, but it really is just such an open term to say, like, look for the art. But I
Yeah.
think it's like a feeling. You can get that feeling from anything. I remember a story my dad told me about a father coming to pick up one of his students from the drawing class, and my dad had been, I think, just waiting with him, and my dad just started drawing a table and chairs that was sitting there, and the student's dad was impressed that, like, oh, never would have thought it could be art. And it's like, well, of course, anything can.
Hmm.
I think that people are drawn a lot when they collect things, though, to the subject matter, so it's important to not disregard that, you know um, but yeah, it's easy to tell a story with art, even if you don't want to. And I think a lot of times I don't want to tell a story. I just pick that reference because I love the way that figure looked. I love the wrinkles in their clothing, or I love the way the light hit their hair or something. And I know people might not see it that way. They might have questions about, like, who is this or whatever. And yeah, I
Yeah, I
guess
don't know. I often wonder that myself.
yeah.
So for those who aren't watching, you're missing out because while he was talking, we had a little demonstration that I pulled up from his Instagram where it showed how he used
Yep.
little brushes. It
Back
is
through
quite
it.
remarkable that's the way you work.
Thank you.
It isn't predictable at all. There was one you did with oil. Wish I could
Mhm.
find that where you were also using a small brush. And as an oil painter, I was like, what? I've never seen
I
anyone
have
paint like that.
at the top of the page, I have in the archives, I have,
That's where it is. Okay, thanks for reminding me.
yeah, they're easier to find. And then
Right. Is it this one?
I think so, yeah. And that was a different,
Right
those
here.
ones, yeah, this was a different kind of approach than I'd ever taken. And I want to try this again.
Oh,
I
so
felt
this
like,
isn't typical then.
no, I wanted to make it messier in my mind, because I thought that, like, when I paint with oil, when I get clean with it, sometimes I don't think it looks as nice, or it doesn't look as realistic or something. And some people are so good at painting just beautiful, I don't know if the word clean is right, but just very tidy paintings. And I find it really hard. So I thought, like, let me just push the opposite way and just purposely make it messy with control, but um, purposely leave the brushstrokes a little bit.
Is this a comber right here? Brush?
Yeah, and yeah, those can get that really cool, messy look at first. It just gives me ideas for texture that I don't know if I'd be able to get just with my hand and the clean brush, pushing those around and stuff.
Yeah, that's wild, man. And you're using short handled brushes too.
I know
It's a watercolorist thing.
yeah, it must be just being really close to the paper. Painting from life, yeah, you definitely want to, like, be able to extend your arm more and measure more, and the long handle brushes let you back up more. And so
Yeah, there are other oil painters that do. I think Casey Baugh or Baugh does short handle brushes. I feel like I've met others who do it.
Mhm.
I mean, hey, like I said, if it doesn't matter, if it looks good, it looks good.
Yeah, I think so. And then I think that part of my brain too also goes in like, yeah, but there is a reason people use different lengths. And then I go back to be like, oh, maybe I should try to do it different, even though it will work for some things. I do definitely value, suggestions, and if you want to call them rules or whatever styles people use or technique. Even though I will show a certain technique that I've been liking or using, I don't ever want to give the impression that it's just the only way to do, because I don't know. I've taken a break from workshops in the last few years because
From
I've,
teaching them?
yeah, I've found it not difficult. The students have always been really cool and fun. And I learn a lot from them too. Some of the people are so talented that come to see the watercolor style that I learn a lot, but I've just felt like I don't have answers sometimes. And people don't necessarily always want that from the workshop. They just want to observe, but
Yeah,
yeah, I felt
I'm sad to
really
hear that. I was going to ask you if you teach workshops because I'd love to take a watercolor workshop from you.
I'm going to be doing more this year.
Oh, you are? Okay.
It's just I can't go back to doing. I was doing not a lot, but some traveling ones, and I find that vacationing is fun, and it takes away from the stress of I don't like flying and stuff. So to get over that, to also be working is hard for me to balance that. So in the future, um, like talking to Sean and stuff, he's been teaching for so long that he's more comfortable with. Just it's like just muscle memory from working at Art Center and everything. That teaching is not a huge deal, but then for me, yeah, I'm kind of a shy person and I want to make sure everybody has a good time, but sometimes you have to be hard with people and I just don't want to do it. And I'm just like, but I don't want to ever lie to people. And I don't think I have, you always try to I always try to find the thing that is working in the painting and try to be like, this part is absolutely working. Let's work it more into the rest of the painting and it is so much about teaching people how to see, and then I think like how do I look at things, and maybe I need to work on looking at certain things a certain way, and so I get in my head a lot of the workshop. I would absolutely love to paint with you sometime.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. So how do you know Sean? Because he's out in California and you're in Denver.
I'm in LA actually.
Oh, you're in LA now. Oh, I thought you said you moved to Denver. I didn't realize you moved to LA.
I moved to Denver from Fort Collins, Colorado. So about an hour. Fort Collins is about an hour north of Denver. So I moved in Denver's the big city compared to Fort Collins. So I moved down there in 2010, and then in 2013, I moved out to California to work at that game company.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Okay.
I jump back and forth a lot.
That's okay. No, sometimes I do miss things because I'm working the equipment and doing the interview. I need a team. Yeah, sometimes I miss stuff. So man,
meeting Sean, he and Kate Zambrano, they're both just such fantastic artists. They're on the Trick team. So Courtney and Andrew, Courtney who runs Trickel was nice enough to. I'm so shy that I mentioned something I think in an email about I'd really love to meet them or something, and she just arranged a little lunch. It was really nice, and that was in 2019.
So you're on that team as well.
I am, yeah.
What does that entail?
It's basically doing demo videos and promoting any of the brushes and their products, and then in exchange for that, getting art supplies, and they do offer money now and stuff. It's become a really cool thing. There's a ton of people on the team now that are really talented, and everybody can kind of choose how they want to earn the money each quarter. It's like a quarterly breakdown thing.
Wow, that's cool that they're doing that.
It's Courtney's really transformed the company I think she's been with them like 20 years or something, even more maybe. And just engaging with artists has really helped their brand quite a bit. And I mean, if I see an actual artist who I know and follow their work recommend something, I'm much more likely to buy it. Yeah, I've never had a problem with any of their brushes, and I use them for pretty much everything now. So
nice. That's a sweet deal, getting free supplies and paid on top of that. That's awesome. Yeah, so, definitely. All right, man, this has been a blast, dude. It's seriously been awesome. Yeah. But I always have one final question for you. And that is, what if you had one piece of advice that either you had or you wish you had when you were starting out, what would it be?
I would tell myself that it may not work out how you think it's going to work out, but it absolutely will. Because I think now it would be a lot easier for me to tell myself that. But yeah, I salute the 19-year-old, the 18, 19-year-old version who didn't really know a lot and didn't have a lot of prospects to go forward. That really takes a lot of courage. So I think if people are doubting themselves at any point, that's the time that you really have to work hard, because it's so easy to backtrack at that time and think like, well, isn't it smarter to maybe give up and go into something else? But I think it's a feeling that's so deep in us to be painters or artists or create, that if you just know that's you and you know, then yeah, it's like, oh, my advice is don't give up. That sounds pretty cheesy, but it will work out. It will work out. And it's not necessarily going to be how you think it will. And I think if people can be okay with that, their artistic journey may not be easier, but there will be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, whatever tunnel people are in at the time.
You know what? After almost 130 interviews, I think that's the first time I've heard that advice. That's pretty impressive. That's good. Yeah. Well, thanks again, man. It's seriously been a blast. And I guess do let me know. Do you mind letting me know if you do a workshop? Because who knows if I'll see it on Instagram.
I'll email you. Yeah.
Yeah. Email me. That'd be great. I would love to take a workshop from you. Maybe it'll help me not be so intimidated by watercolor, seeing you do it in person.
I would love to take a workshop from you. You're in Utah, right?
I'm in Utah. Yeah. I'm doing a workshop in, I don't do them that much. I do them in Scottsdale every January. It's Scottsdale Artist School. And then I'm doing one in at the Yorkshire Workshop with Simi Jackson.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's about it. I don't do them a lot. I'm like you, man. I'm just kind of like, you get in the groove. It's hard to just pick up and leave for a week. Mm-hmm. So, but hopefully someday I'll get to meet you at some point. That'd be awesome.
I would love that. I'd love to meet you.
Yeah. Well, thanks again.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.